Hi, good afternoon. My name is Judy Clark, and I'm very honored and happy to be able to participate in the community of B'nai Jeshurun in our process of a journey that begins as we enter a Elul um, toward a process of reckoning and renewal and redemption that will culminate in the High Holy Days. In particular, I'm going to be talking about Teshuvah, which is really at the heart of this period for us. And I do it from a particular experience and perspective. So let me just say a little bit about myself, as some of you know. I spent 38 years in prison. I've been out for a year. I was sentenced for my participation in a attempted robbery of a Brinks truck in which 2 policemen and a Brinks guard were killed. Several other people were wounded, and an entire community was traumatized. This was back in 1981. I spent many years trying to come to terms with my crime, and also with the fact that I was the mother. At the time of my crime, I was the mother of a very young child, less than a year old, who I left to do something that carried with it the risk of leaving her without a parent, which is what ultimately happened. When I first started to land in that reality and realize the enormity of what I had done and its destructiveness in my own life, for my child, my family, my friends and community, and ultimately toward those that I had harmed very irreparably in terms of participating in something that caused the death of 3 people and left 9 children without a father, 3 widows, and enormous hurt and harm. It felt so enormous that I felt very paralyzed. Pretty much felt like there was no repair that was possible, that I had blown it in terms of my being a mother, and in terms of the harms that I had caused. I felt unforgivable and irredeemable. And for me, who sort of searched for some way of trying to reckon with my life, Judaism became, and being part of a Jewish community really became a vehicle to try to imagine how to look at the wreckage of my life and try to figure out ways to emerge from it. And Teshuvah really was my roadmap. So when we think about Teshuvah, we are looking at a process and understanding that all of us will do harm. Most of us won't do the kind of harm I did, but all of us break trust with people that we care about, people we don't care about, strangers we don't know about. We're part of systems in which people are that harm others. We are part of a lifestyle that is destructive of the earth and all other creatures. And Teshuvah is our way of trying to grapple with what that means, that, that part of our humanity is doing harm. And yet part of our divinity is to recognize that we do harm, and to realize that the recognition of harm means that we can do the work of repair. So for me, becoming aware of Teshuvah as a process and a roadmap was really one of the ways and parts of the rituals of atonement that are part of our tradition helped me take what felt like such an enormous harm that there was no way out of it, and realized that there were things that I could do. Teshuvah tells us the first step, which was the step of recognizing it, is an important step. But then we move from that. We move toward a step of apologizing, and that was something that I did in the form of public letters of apology, and also in terms of frank conversations with my family and others who were deeply affected by my actions. And when we do that apology, we can expect skepticism, possibility, and anger, and that can't deter us, because the next step in that apology, what makes that apology meaningful, is when we then realize we have to find ways to repair. And that reparation is both in terms of ways that we've harmed, and can we do something to lessen that harm, which for me was a really difficult thing, because when you're faced with loss of life, the question of how to repair has to come from finding the meaning and what are the lessons, and sharing those lessons with others in ways that means that they honor the losses of other people. But it also meant realizing that, as devastating as was my initial abandonment of my child, that I had to find ways to rebuild myself and rebuild my life. So the repair that we do in Teshuvah is both repair toward others, but also self-repair, so that faced with the same situation, the work we've done to change and recognize what were all the impulses and realities and ways of thinking that led us to doing harm, and going through what is not just an intellectual process, but a deep process of soul searching and of connecting to that view that comes from recognizing that there's something larger than ourselves that allows us to then, change in ways that are spiritual, psychological, as well as cognitively. And that kind of repair means that faced with those situations, we're going to do something different. And because of that, we ultimately are leading towards being able to heal the rift in the fabric of life and in society and families, in the relationships that have been torn apart by our actions, and we come back together from that. And so Teshuvah, which starts out with a solemn recognition of harm, is actually a profoundly hopeful process, because it recognizes that when we do wrong, we are acting out of an alienation from our divine selves, from our better selves, and that in the process of repair, we don't throw anything out. We take all of that, including our experiences of doing wrong, to actually change and end up in a deeper and more elevated, more humble, more aware, more connected to others, more sense of wholeness place within ourselves as individuals and with those that we are interacting with, including those that we've harmed. Because ultimately, at the end of having done that work, we then seek to rejoin, reconnect those relationships with others, and so that we emerge redeemed, and the community is able to redeem its own losses, and us as redeemed people. So there's that sense that we are something more than our worst. The hopefulness is that we are something more than our worst impulses and our worst actions, which is what we need in this period, because we face dire circumstances in the midst of a pandemic that has revealed all of the inequalities of our society, all of the failures of our society to create a public health system that can address the virus at a time when other countries are doing a lot better than we are, and has given life to an incredible upsurge of from those that have been most harmed and borne the brunt of this epidemic in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we can feel that these events are overwhelming and what we can do. What can we do? But if we think about Teshuvah and we think about the fact that in our own lives, we can find ways to connect to those systems of white supremacy, those inequalities, those failures of our society, and actually find ways that are meaningful to each of us, to challenge ourselves to change, to challenge ourselves to reconnect to ourselves, to this social fabric as it is, to make some dent in it, and to enrich our lives with a sense of purpose that comes from Teshuvah, and a sense that there's something better that we're all aiming toward. So I really hope to be part of a process that is meaningful, that starts now. We don't wait for the high holy days, to really take a look at what have been the losses, what have been the harms, and what we can do that allows us to end up in a deeper, stronger, more integrated place as individuals, as families, as a community, as a congregation, and in the larger community. Thank you.